Rain hammered the cracked pavement of a forgotten street in Ashwood, Oregon, on a bitter November night in 2024. 12-year-old Ethan Carter stood soaked to the bone, his thin frame shaking as he pounded on a rusted steel door. One arm clutched his side, shielding ribs bruised purple from blows he'd taken too many times. His voice cracked, raw and desperate, as he shouted, "Please, you gotta help my mom." Behind him, the slurred roar of his foster father, Victor Grayson, tore through the storm. "Ain't nobody coming for you, kid. She's mine." A bottle shattered against the porch, glass spraying like sparks into the dark. Ethan flinched, but didn't stop hammering the door. Heavy boots stomped closer, and the belt in Victor's hand gleamed wet under the porch light. Ethan's heart thundered, his small body trembling. But then the night split open with a sound that drowned even the storm chorus of Harley engines, 15 strong, roaring into the alley like a pack of wolves bursting from the shadows. Headlights sliced through the rain, chrome glinting like blades. Ethan's voice broke again, louder, fiercer. "Please, save her." Before Victor could swing, a figure stepped between them, leather jacket creaking, a red and black patch blazing on his back. The Iron Riders. The man's silhouette loomed, unyielding, as Victor's sneer faltered. What happened next would ripple through Ashwood, leaving the town stunned, divided, and forever changed. This is the story of a boy's plea, a brotherhood's answer, and a fight that forced a community to face its own soul. Ethan's sneakers slipped on the wet concrete as he clutched a crumpled note, the address scrawled in his mother's shaky hand. Victor's voice still echoed in his head, thick with whiskey and rage, promising pain to anyone who dared interfere. Inside their crumbling rental house, Ethan's mother, Sarah, was trapped, her arms bruised, her spirit battered by years of silence. Ethan had no one else to turn to. No cops had ever answered their calls fast enough. No neighbors had ever done more than whisper pity behind locked doors. But this address, this door, this last hope, it belonged to the Iron Riders, a motorcycle club whispered about in tones of fear and awe. Their clubhouse smelled of motor oil and smoke, a fortress where outsiders were as welcome as a snake in a henhouse. Ethan's fists ached from pounding, his throat raw from shouting, until finally the door groaned open. Eyes pierced him from the dim interior, some hard, suspicious, others softening just a fraction. Boots scuffed the floor. Bottles stopped clinking. The room, alive with rough laughter moments before, fell silent as a graveyard. Ethan tried to speak, but his voice came out a whisper. "He's gonna kill her." The man at the center of the room didn't move at first. Mason Holt, leader of the Iron Riders, carried a presence that sucked the air tight around him, broad shoulders, gray-flecked beard, a leather patch stitched like armor across his back. He didn't ask Ethan to repeat himself. He didn't demand proof. His gaze locked on the boy's trembling hands, the welt blooming under his sleeve, the raw panic no kid could fake. "Your mom." Mason's voice was low, steady as gravel crunching under tires. Ethan nodded, his throat burning. "He's drunk again. Lock the doors." "I crawled out the back window." She couldn't. A murmur rippled through the room. One biker, Jackal, slammed a fist on the table, cursing under his breath. Another, Bear, leaned forward, his massive frame swallowing the light behind him. "Where?" he growled. Ethan stammered out the address, 1247 Elm Street. The words barely left his lips before Mason stood, his chair screeching across the wood like a gunshot. "Mount up," he ordered. The room erupted into motion. Leather jackets snapped off hooks. Helmets clicked into place. Chains looped around belts. The floor shook as men poured toward the row of Harleys waiting in the rain. Ethan's pulse raced, matching the rhythm of boots hitting the ground. This wasn't hesitation. This was instinct, a brotherhood moving as one. Mason crouched to Ethan's level, pulling on his gloves. "You're riding with us, kid." Ethan blinked, unsure, until a scarred hand rested on his shoulder, not rough, but steady, grounding. "You're not alone anymore." The first engine roared to life, deep and guttural, shaking the night. Another followed, then another, until 15 bikes growled in unison, their chrome catching slashes of rain. Ethan was lifted onto the back of Jackal's Harley, his arms clamping around leather as the bike rumbled beneath him like a living beast. The convoy tore out of the lot, tires spitting water, engines thundering in a chorus that rattled windows awake. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains, faces pale with disbelief as the iron riders carved through the storm, a wall of defiance carrying a boy who'd run out of options. Inside the house on Elm Street, Victor staggered through the hallway, belt swinging, his rage a wildfire. Sarah crouched, arms raised to shield herself, her eyes swollen, lips cracked. He sneered, spitting venom. No one cares about you. Not the cops, not your kid, nobody. But outside, the world was shifting. The roar hit first, engines building like an avalanche. Dishes rattled in cupboards. Picture frames trembled on walls. Victor froze mid-swing, his brow furrowing as headlights swept across the curtains, bright as searchlights. The riders surrounded the house in seconds, boots crunching gravel, engines idling like growling beasts. Ethan slid off the bike, legs shaky but eyes blazing with something Victor had never seen: defiance backed by an army. Mason stepped onto the porch, rain dripping from his jacket, his presence filling the doorway like a storm of its own. Victor's belt hung limp, his bravado crumbling as the truth closed in. He wasn't the biggest man here anymore. Ethan's voice cut through the night, small but fierce. "Leave her alone." Victor barked a laugh, but it rang hollow. "You think a gang of bikers makes you safe?" Mason didn't flinch. His chin lifted, eyes cold as steel. "No, but it makes you accountable." Neighbors clustered at their windows, phones raised, red recording dots blinking like 100 watchful eyes. The town that had turned away for years couldn't look away now. Victor swung the belt in a desperate arc. Mason caught his wrist midair, squeezing until the buckle clattered to the porch. He leaned in, voice low and lethal. "Not tonight." Victor stumbled back, rage unraveling into fear. Sarah gasped as Jackal pulled her gently behind the line of riders, their leather forming a shield. Ethan rushed to her, rain and tears mixing on their faces. For the first time in years, they weren't alone. But as the riders stood guard, blue and red lights flickered at the end of the street. Police cruisers rolled in, officers murmuring into radios, their faces uncertain. Ashwood was about to decide what story it believed: outlaws breaking in or saviors standing tall. The cruisers idled, wipers squealing against the rain. An officer stepped out, hand hovering over his belt, unsure whether to reach for his radio or his gun. His eyes darted from Sarah's bruises to the circle of riders, then to Victor, sagging against the porch rail, belt at his feet, his drunken fury curdling into shame. "What the hell's going on here?" the officer demanded, voice cracking under the weight of 15 idling engines. Mason stepped forward, rain dripping off his jaw. "Domestic abuse." Kid ran for help. "We answered." His words carried no shout, but they landed heavier than one. The officer's partner leaned out of the cruiser. "This ain't your call, Holt. You don't get to play hero." Mason's gaze didn't waver. "Then why wasn't anyone else here?" "She's got bruises older than your last patrol." The kid knew the system wouldn't come. "That's why he came to us." Neighbors murmured. Phones tilted closer, footage already streaming. The officer swallowed, calling into his radio with clipped words. Ethan clung to his mother, whispering, "Don't let them take me back." Mason crouched, his voice low for the boy alone. "Rule 1, kid. Nobody touches family, not with fists, not with fear, not with words. Tonight, you're family. That means you're under our protection." Ethan's eyes widened, his breath catching. He'd never heard family defined like that before. Jackal muttered, "Cops won't like this heat. They'll spin it to look clean." He was right. By morning, headlines split Ashwood. Some called it vigilantism. Others called it salvation. The riders didn't wait for the town's verdict. Mason signaled, and the men closed ranks. One biker draped a jacket over Sarah's shoulders. Another lifted Ethan onto a Harley. The convoy roared out, cutting through the flashing lights, leaving Victor alone with his wreckage. Neighbors stared, mouths open, the Engine's thunder vibrating in their bones. The ride back to the clubhouse was slow, deliberate, a show of force. Every street they passed lit up with phones, some clapping, others glaring, whispering that the riders were just criminals in heroes' clothing. Inside the clubhouse, warmth replaced the rain. Sarah sat at a scarred table, clutching a steaming mug, her bruises stark under the dim light. Ethan stayed glued to her side, his gaze flicking to the men he'd once only heard cursed in whispers. Mason stood at the table's head, peeling off his gloves. You called us, he said, voice steady. That means something. You're under our code now. Rule 1, you heard. Nobody touches family. He held Ethan's gaze until the boy nodded. Jackal leaned forward, chain coiled on the table. Rule 2, you speak truth, even when it stings. Lies kill faster than fists. Bear rumbled. Rule 3, you never ride alone, out there or in here. You've got brothers now. Ethan swallowed hard, the words sinking deep. These weren't rules to cage him, they were rules to keep him standing. Mason's eyes swept the room. The system will come for them. They'll call us outlaws, worse. But we know the truth. He looked at Ethan. Rule 4, never forget why we ride. We protect what others throw away. That's you now, kid. You and your mom. The town wasn't done. Whispers spread like wildfire. Some said the riders had saved Sarah from death. Others claimed they'd staged it for glory. Police faced questions they couldn't answer. Why had they ignored Sarah's cries for years? Why had a boy trusted outlaws over badges? The mayor called an emergency meeting. Papers printed editorials, some praising, some damning. In living rooms across Ashwood, families argued. Were the riders criminals or the only ones who did right? Ethan didn't hear the debates that night. He slept on a cot in the clubhouse, his mother's hand on his hair, the low hum of biker voices like a strange lullaby. For the first time, he didn't jolt awake at footsteps. But Mason stayed up, staring at the storm outside. He knew attention brought enemies, and enemies would test them harder than ever. By dawn, the storm cleared, leaving streets slick and reflective. Ashwood wore two faces, half grateful, half fearful. The riders rolled out in daylight, Ethan and Sarah at their center, a public declaration of protection. Some cheered, others cursed, but all watched. And in a glass-walled office above Pine Street, someone else watched too. Eleanor Voss, a woman with a tailored suit and a smile sharp as a switchblade. She wasn't cheering or cursing. She was calculating. When outlaws looked like heroes, power shifted, and power never shifted without a fight. The story swelled beyond the clubhouse. What began as Ethan's midnight plea became a firestorm that burned through every conversation in Ashwood. Some whispered heroes like a prayer. Others spat outlaws like a curse. Ethan felt the weight of it all. For the first time, people saw him not as a foster kid shuffled from home to home, but as the boy who'd sparked a war. On Saturday, the riders rolled through Pine Street, engines throbbing, chrome gleaming. The town lined the sidewalks, split into two camps. One side clapped, holding signs, "Thank you, riders. Protect the innocent." A woman shouted, "They saved her life." The other side jeered, brandishing placards, "Outlaws aren't justice." A shop owner yelled, "Criminals don't get to play hero." Ethan rode behind Bear, his stomach knotted, feeling every stare burn into him. Mason slowed the convoy at Pine Street's heart, where the courthouse faced the diner. He raised a fist, and the engines cut off. The silence was deafening, every whisper amplified. Mason dismounted, boots hitting pavement with finality. He scanned the crowd, gratitude, anger, phones recording it all. His voice carried, calm but unshakable. A boy asked for help because no one else showed up. We did. That's the truth. Call it outlaw justice. Call it wrong. But you can't call it nothing, because nothing's what he had before. Cheers erupted from one side, boos from the other. The divide cracked wider. A man stepped forward, Henry Walsh, a local developer with a politician's charm and a bully's ego. He pointed at Mason. "This town doesn't need your kind acting like saviors. We've got police, courts. You think you can rewrite the rules because a kid cried at your door?" Jackal's chain clinked, but Mason raised a hand, stopping him. "We didn't rewrite the rules. We followed the ones you ignored. No man hits a woman or kid on our watch. That's the law we answered to." Walsh sneered, turning to the crowd. "Cheer them now, and tomorrow they're kicking in your door. You want outlaws deciding right and wrong." The street bristled. Some nodded, others shouted him down. Ethan's throat tightened, his voice trapped. Then, without thinking, he stood on the Harley's seat, his shout piercing the chaos. "They saved us. You all saw her bruises, heard her screams, and did nothing. They came when you wouldn't." His voice cracked, tears glinting in the sun. The crowd froze, stunned by the boy's raw defiance. Walsh's face darkened, stepping closer. "Kid, you don't know what your Mason was." Between them in a flash, a wall of leather and steel. "You don't talk to him. You don't even look at him. He's under our protection. Test that, and you'll find out what it means. The air snapped taut. Jackal twirled his chain. Bear shifted, a mountain ready to move. The crowd leaned in, hungry for a spark. Walsh spat and retreated, his bravado shrinking. The riders' engines roared back to life, drowning the divide. Ethan sat taller, his voice heard, his truth cutting deeper than the jeers. As the convoy rolled out, Ashwood buzzed with aftershock. Reporters scrambled, families argued, kids whispered in awe. Ethan wasn't just a victim, Enamore was a symbol. And symbols, Mason knew, were dangerous. They sparked hope. They provoked fear. And they drew enemies from the shadows. In a sleek office with blinds drawn tight, Eleanor Voss watched the footage, her lips curling into a thin smile. So, the boys found his knights, she murmured, leaning back. Let's see how long they last. Whispers reached the riders' clubhouse by dusk. Jackal stormed in, chain wrapped tight around his fist. They're planning something. Grayson's name keeps coming up, and he's got backing now. Eleanor's pulling strings. Mason didn't look up from the map on the table, but his jaw tightened. He'd known this was bigger than one abusive drunk. Ashwood wasn't the battlefield, it was the stage. Where, he asked. Old lumber mill by the river, Jackal said. Lights were on last night. Trucks rolling in. Not just Grayson's crew outsiders. The room stilled. Bear cracked his knuckles, the sound like breaking branches. Slim, the youngest rider, shifted nervously. Ethan sat in the corner, listening despite orders to rest, his small frame rigid. He didn't catch every word, but he knew danger when he heard it. Mason crouched in front of him. Rule 6, the fight always comes. You don't run from it, you meet it standing. But you don't walk in until you're ready. Tonight, you stay. We ride. The engines fired up at dusk, splitting into pairs, circling the industrial district. The old lumber mill loomed, its broken windows glowing like eyes. The air was too quiet, too still. Mason knew a trap when he saw one, but sometimes you had to spring it to see its teeth. They rolled in, gravel crunching under tires. Harleys lined the rusted walls, engines growling low as the riders dismounted. Mason led the way inside, boots echoing in the dark. The air reeked of damp wood and oil. Fresh tire marks slashed the concrete. Then the doors slammed shut. Shadows moved, and men poured out, not drunks, but hardened riders in gray jackets, patches Ethan didn't recognize. At their center was Victor Grayson, his grin jagged, a bandage across his jaw from Mason's last blow. Thought you'd come sniffing, Holt, he spat. Welcome to the kill box. Mason squared his stance, his men fanning out. Jackal spun his chain, sparks flashing. Bear cracked his neck. Grayson waved a crowbar like a flag. You humiliated me on Pine Street. Tonight, you bleed. The rush came fast, pipes whistling, chains snapping, boots thundering. The mill erupted into chaos. Bear plowed through the first wave, slamming a man against a beam, dust raining down. Jackal's chain lashed out, disarming an attacker. Slim ducked low, knocking a man sprawling with desperate speed. Mason moved like a predator, weaving through strikes, dropping foes with calculated blows. But the numbers were heavy. For every man they felled, another pressed in. Sparks flew as chains scraped metal. The air thickened with sweat and adrenaline. Grayson swung his crowbar at Mason's skull. Mason sidestepped, but the blow clipped his shoulder, pain flaring hot. He staggered, then drove a hook into Grayson's jaw, blood spraying. Grayson laughed through broken teeth. That all you got? The riders rallied, backs together, but the mob pushed them toward the center. Then Mason saw her, Eleanor Voss, high in a broken office window, her silhouette sharp in a tailored coat. She wasn't fighting. She didn't need to. She was the puppet master, toasting the carnage below with a cold smile. Grayson roared, "This ain't about you and me, Holt. It's her game." The truth hit like a second blow. Eleanor had lured them here to film them as animals, to bury their name in edited footage. The world wouldn't see Ethan's plea or Sarah's bruises, just bikers brawling, proof they were outlaws. Mason caught Grayson's wrist mid-swing, twisting until bone ground against bone, the crowbar clanging to the floor. "You're not a king, you're a pawn," he growled. "She's already traded you." Eleanor tapped her phone, a camera light blinking red. Mason's blood roared. This was a war of stories, and they were losing. "Rule 7, he shouted to his men. "You fight to show the truth." The riders roared back, their fury sharpening. Jackal smashed a camera. Bear hurled men into crates. Slim leaped from a beam, taking down an attacker. The trap broke under their defiance. Eleanor's smile faded as her spectacles slipped away. Ethan, hidden near the door against orders, saw it all: the trap, the truth, the war that wasn't just about him anymore. When Mason pinned Grayson to the floor, boot on his chest, the mill rang with groans of the beaten. Eleanor was gone, her window empty. She hadn't stayed for defeat. Mason stood tall, chest heaving. This was round one. She thinks we'll break, but as long as we stand, the story's ours. Ethan stepped forward, whispering, "Then we can't let her write it." The fight left the riders bloodied but unbroken, their jackets torn, knuckles split. By morning, news anchors stood outside the mill, pointing to shattered crates and bloodstains. Headlines screamed of biker gang clashes, painting the riders as predators. Eleanor's footage leaked, edited to show them striking first, Ethan's plea cut out. He sat in the clubhouse, staring at the TV, whispering, "That's not what happened." Sarah pulled him close, her voice shaking. "They're making monsters out of the men who saved us." Mason watched the screen, his mind elsewhere. This wasn't a street fight, Anna Maria, it was a war of perception. And Eleanor had deeper pockets than anyone knew. Jackal stormed in, slamming his phone down. Grayson's walking free, and he's got company. Eleanor's brought in outsiders, 88 riders, patched from 3 states. They call themselves the Reapers. Bear cursed, his hands flexing. Slim paled. Ethan clung to Sarah, fear creeping back. 88, Bear growled. "That's a flood." Mason didn't flinch. "Then we damn it." By dusk, the Reapers rolled into Ashwood, their gray jackets gleaming under neon. They didn't hide, they paraded, circling blocks, revving engines outside diners. Shops shuttered early. Parents locked doors. The town's pulse quickened. From the clubhouse porch, Ethan watched headlights snake across the hills, dozens of bikes tightening a noose around Ashwood. "They're coming for us, aren't they?" he whispered. Mason crouched beside him. "Rule 8. Never fear being outnumbered. Numbers don't fight, men do. And I've never seen 88 men break 12 brothers who stand true." Ethan nodded, but dread lingered. Inside, the clubhouse became a war room. Maps marked choke points, gas stations under Reaper control, highways crawling with their riders. Jackal jabbed the southern road. "They've locked the bridge. We're boxed." Mason corrected, tested. "Eleanor thinks she can erase us, but pressure forges steel. We hold. We show Ashwood who protects them when the law turns away." Sarah stepped forward, voice fragile but firm. "What if they come here? What if they take Ethan?" Mason's gaze locked on hers. "Rule 9. Nobody takes what we protect. Not the law, not the streets, not her." Eleanor's shadow grew. Billboards sprouted overnight, her face plastered on charity ads, her press conferences denouncing outlaw terror. The Reapers set up camp at Ashwood's edges, their bikes lined like an invading army. The first clash came on Friday night. The riders rolled through downtown, Ethan and Sarah at their center. At the courthouse steps, the Reapers blocked the road, engines snarling, faces cold. The town watched from windows and barricades, phones raised. Grayson stepped forward, crowbar in hand, jaw bruised but sneer intact. "You're done, Holt. 88-12. You're finished." Mason dismounted, boots echoing. "Numbers lie. I see 88 dogs waiting for orders, and 12 men who don't need them." Ethan's voice broke the standoff, trembling but clear. "You didn't save anyone. They did." Heads turned, his defiance cutting sharper than the engines. Grayson snarled, stepping closer, but Mason was there, his glare pinning him. "You don't touch him. Test that, and you'll learn why 12 men outweigh 88 shadows." Engines revved, fists tightened. The crowd braced. Blue lights flashed, sirens howling as cruisers screeched in. "Stand down," the chief barked. The Reapers backed off, Grayson cursing. Eleanor watched from a balcony, her lips tight. The riders held formation, unbroken, as the town exhaled. The siege tightened. Reapers patrolled every corner, their silence louder than roars. The clubhouse was a fortress now, maps pinned, weapons checked. Ethan asked, "What if they come here?" Mason crouched. "Rule 11, you don't run from the storm. You brace, you ride, you outlast it." The final storm hit on Saturday night at an abandoned rail yard on Ashwood's edge. The riders rolled in, 12 against 88, knowing Eleanor wanted a public reckoning. The yard hummed with Reaper engines, floodlights rigged to catch every move. Grayson stood at the front, crowbar raised. You rode into your grave, Holt. Tonight, the riders fall. Eleanor appeared on a catwalk, her smile sharp, cameras rolling. Mason dismounted, his men fanning out. You've been hiding behind him, behind cameras, behind her, he said, nodding to Eleanor. Tonight, it's you and me. Grayson swung, the crowbar slicing air. Mason ducked, landing a fist in Grayson's ribs, the crack echoing. The yard erupted, chains snapping, pipes clanging, fists smashing bone. Bear bulldozed through men. Jackal's chain lashed like lightning. Slim darted low, reckless and fast. Grayson's crowbar hit Mason's side, dropping him to one knee. This is for Ashwood. Grayson roared, raising the weapon. Mason surged up, wrenching the crowbar free, hammering Grayson's face until he crashed into a crate, blood streaming. Eleanor's voice cut through, amplified. Enough. Look at them animals tearing each other apart for a boy's sob story. The crowd gasped. Sarah covered her mouth. Ethan shouted, she's lying. They saved us. Not the police. Not her charities, nobody, but them. Every camera swung to him, his voice raw but undeniable. Eleanor's smile cracked. He's a child, she snapped. Mason straightened, blood on his jaw. He understands family better than you ever will. Tonight, the world sees who's pulling the strings. Phones streamed live. Eleanor's Empire Charities. Contracts grumbled as her manipulation was exposed. Grayson tried to stand, but his men faltered, their loyalty bought, not earned. Eleanor vanished from the catwalk, her plan in ashes. The riders regrouped, battered but standing. Ethan and Sarah stepped into their circle. Mason raised a fist, his men echoing it. Engines roared, shaking the yard with defiance. By dawn, the footage had flooded the internet. Protect the boy, Eleanor exposed. Her mugshot hit the news. Racketeering, conspiracy. Grayson vanished, a broken man. Ashwood shifted. Some still spat at the riders, but others waved, a mother whispering to her child. That's the boy they saved. Weeks later, the riders rode again, Ethan on his own Harley, its tank etched with never alone again. Mason pulled alongside, shouting, Rule 14, kid, carry the ride forward. Ethan grinned, revving his throttle, the roar joining the chorus. He wasn't the scared kid pounding on a door anymore. He was family. This wasn't just Ethan's story, it's a question for you. Would you trust a system that failed a boy or the outlaws who answered his call? Would you cheer for the riders or condemn them? Drop your thoughts below, because this isn't just about one night, it's about what family means when the world turns away. Hit that like button to spread this story. Subscribe and ring the bell for more tales that'll grip your soul. And if you think this was intense, wait for the story of a broke veteran who pulled an Iron Rider's son from a fire and what they gave him in return. Click now. You won't believe the ending.